Good evening and welcome to the McLuhan Institute, TMI Live 48, Forward Through the Rearview Mirror. So called because of this book I happen to be cataloging. So it's Tuesday night, it is 9 o'clock, and as usual, here I am, amen, in the library of Eric McLuhan, where every week I try to get in here for a few hours and document this library of Eric McLuhan that you see behind me. I'm currently just below 600 entries in my spreadsheet, which isn't that far along, given that I've been at it just about a year now, I think, maybe longer. I've been doing these live things almost a year, judging by number 48. I may have lost track of numbers here and there, and some weeks I haven't been in here, but I am plugging away. 10 years ago or so, when I did the inventory of Marshall McLuhan's library, it took me, I spent a year and a half on it. But for much of that, I was working 5 days a week and pretty full days. So I made a lot more progress, plus I was moving a little bit faster. I'm taking my time a bit more in my father's library, just because I can afford to take the time now, given that it's mine. I live here now, so the pressure is off a little bit, which is lovely, and I'm very grateful for it. Thank you to my supporters on Patreon, patreon.com/McLuhan, who help allow me to spend more time doing McLuhan related things, not necessarily this inventory, which is dragging on, but it's all good. I've been doing a lot of other things lately. If we have time, I'll get into that, but I thought I'd share where I am in the inventory, and where that is on the McLuhan shelves, which is over here. You haven't seen that in a while, have you? Let's take a look. I'll flip the camera around. There we are. And excuse the mess, this place is kind of chaos. Yeah, just to show you how far I have or have not come. I started over here and went through there, and through here, here, and there, and now I'm in here. So given that I still have to go through that, and that, and that, and that, and that, and that, and the back office, and then this side, which is several more shelves. I'm going to be here for years to come, I guess. But it's a labor of love, certainly. Anyway, so here we are. This is AB Shelf 6C that I'm on now. You can see from the gap the books that I'm currently documenting. So I'm going to try and finish the rest of these tonight and get down to this next shelf. I am taking more than my sweet time on it, because the McLuhan books in particular are very rich with annotations and very important to understand. Very helpful to look at Eric's annotations of his father's in his works, obviously. So I'm spending a bit more time on those. Plus, you know, I need to be reading these things to familiarize myself with the whole McLuhan works, of which there are a lot. It never ends, it seems. I haven't made it once through all the McLuhan material, never mind all the rest of this stuff. And I guess I'll probably spend the rest of my life doing it. So this book is on McLuhan, Forward Through the Rearview Mirror. It's a compilation. It's an early McLuhan book from 1996. Inside here there are a couple reviews or notices from the newspaper. Reflections on and by Marshall McLuhan, with commentaries by Tom Cooper, Eric McLuhan, Derek DeKirchhoff, John Fraser, Robert Fulford, Liz Jeffrey, Lewis Lapham, Phil Marchand, Neil Postman, Camille Paglia, Louis Rosetto, Patrick Watson, and Frank Zingroni. I know all of those names. I don't believe I've come across Louis Rosetto. I'm not sure about John Fraser, but the others are fairly usual suspects. This is an interesting book. Oh, you know this, Richard. Cool. I haven't gone through the whole thing, but it's interesting. It pulls, it's sort of done McLuhan, high graphic style, and it pulls across a lot of biographic data about Marshall McLuhan and his family, interspersed with quotes from people. So I thought I would read some of them, because I don't know how easy it is to get a copy of this. He sent you an interview on cassette. Wow, that's fabulous. I hope you'll share that, Richard. That would be fabulous to hear. Eric McLuhan, Aphorisms. My father decided in the 60s that he would try as much as he could to present his ideas in an aphoristic style. Aphorisms, as Francis Bacon said, are incomplete, a bit like cartoons. They are not filled-out essay writing that is highly compressed. The aphorism is a poetic form that calls for a lot of participation on the part of the reader. You have to chew on an aphorism and work with it for a while before you understand it fully. A good aphorism could keep you busy for a week, kicking it around, playing with it, exploring it, taking it apart to see what you can get out of it, and applying it here, there, and everywhere. My father deliberately chose this form of statement because he wanted to teach, not tell or entertain. He said, "For instruction, you use incomplete knowledge so people can fill things in. They can round it out and fill it in with their own experience. If what you want to do is simply to tell people something, then by all means spell it out in the connected essay. But if you want to teach, you don't do that. There's no participation in just telling. That's simply for consumers. They sit there and swallow it or not. But the aphoristic style gives you the opportunity to get a dialogue going, to engage people in the process of discovery." And I was actually talking about that earlier with somebody when we were talking about hot and cool media, how Marshall's own presentation, his aphoristic style, was very cool. That is, low in information and requiring a lot from the person on the other end to fill in the gaps and to insert themselves in their minds, their senses, to get the whole picture, to unpack it, decompress it. What are you saying, Richard? It has Marshall's birth announcement. Oh, does it? Oh, awesome. Like I said, I haven't looked through the whole thing. Here's another piece. Neil Postman. One of the most memorable times I spent with Marshall was at a meeting in Cincinnati of the National Council of Teachers of English. I remember that Charlie Weingartner, McLuhan, and I shared a room together, which was great fun because Charlie and I had a chance to listen to him invent ideas and do his probes deep into the night. On that occasion, his cigar was lit and the lights were off, and it was 2 or 3 in the morning, and we finally had to ask him if he could stop and let us all get some sleep. Neil, I've heard Neil say that before as well. And I've heard other people say as much. I flipped through and found this, which I thought I would read. I used to talk about the global village. I now speak of it more properly as the global theater. Every kid is now concerned with acting, doing his thing outside, and raising a ruckus in a quest for identity. He has lost his identity. Every child on the planet since TV has lost his identity and so becomes a violent force, a lumpen proletariat of Marxist violence. Marshall McLuhan, W5, CTV Television, 1969. For anybody who doesn't know, people often conflate these ideas of global village and global theater, but they're very different. Marshall used them very distinctly. I'll say it for the millionth time. Andrew Quistall has a wonderful explanation of the difference, Marshall's turn from global village to global theater, which you can read on medium.com an article called After the Global Village. He really goes into the whole thing. But essentially, global village was a phrase which Marshall basically took from Wyndham Lewis from America and Cosmic Man, and he used it to describe the world as transformed by telegraph and radio, which he realized later became a different thing after television, specifically after Sputnik in 1957, when the world became a global theater, after Sputnik turned it, all the world a stage. Do check out Andrew's essay if you want to read more about that. And for God's sake, stop calling this the global village. Here's one from John Fraser. I thought this was illuminative. I'm a McLuhan skeptic for probably a silly reason. I had a bizarre encounter over the telephone with him when I was a junior editor at the Toronto Globe and Mail, and he had written a piece that I didn't understand, the first sentence right up to the last sentence. But I knew my duty, and I had to phone him for some clarifications that a senior editor had asked for, and I read the clarifications to him, and all I could remember him saying was, McLuhan wouldn't have said that, McLuhan wouldn't have said this. I realized that anyone who talks about themselves in the third person singular has slightly lost it, but I realized I was talking to the guru of the age, so I humbly hung up the phone. John Fraser here very much misses the point. Marshall McLuhan wasn't talking about himself in the third person singular. He was talking about different parts of himself, which the Marshall McLuhan that we know from all kinds of things is not the Marshall McLuhan who was born Herbert Marshall McLuhan in Edmonton, Alberta, and was an English teacher, literary critic. He developed specific styles and personae for different occasions, and he put them on for specific purposes. So, this person didn't get that point, and I think more and more people are realizing just that performative side of Marshall McLuhan, which he learned from masters. His parents were great storytellers. How did I meet him? I simply wandered into a University of Toronto English class at St. Michael's College, where he was giving a guest lecture. I wasn't expecting much because up until then I wasn't being excited intellectually, but the experience of McLuhan's lecture was so remarkable that I found I had cold sweat trickling down my sides. I was so excited. I can hardly explain to you how wonderful it was to have the 20th century suddenly explained and dropped onto my plate like a possibility that would never end. I remember when the lecture, which was on the contemporary significance of the French symbolist poets, was over, I was in this state of exalted completion, and a guy studying for the priesthood who had been sitting beside me got up and said, "Wow, he was really out in left field today. Did you get any of that?" And we left the hall together, then parted ways. Frank Sangroni. Frank, who I knew as Uncle Frank, was a student of Marshall's and then a lifelong friend of my father Eric's. He and Eric worked together on some things. Frank was a teacher at York and tried very hard to get Dad a teaching position there. I think my dad taught a semester, maybe a year at most there, covering for Frank, I think it was. I remember going to York for one class anyway. Frank was great. He wrote a few books. He contributed a piece to the first McLuhan studies on the pentad, his idea for a fifth part of the laws of media, which I think my dad felt was the only serious attempt to add a fifth part to the tetrad, although he didn't feel it was successful. Eric, Dad was very encouraging of other people to test it and try new things, and I try to follow the same, follow that lead, because it's all exploration. I don't think there are many wrong turns as long as you're genuinely exploring for something new, for something the truth. Go everywhere, check out those weird places, even those dark places, bright places. All's fair in exploration. Here's one. He loved pronouncing upon things, and when people came to him and said, "Marshall, you are a guru," he said existentially, "Yes, I am a guru, and I will be a guru, and I will respond like a guru." More to that point. And that's pretty seductive stuff. He was damn good at it. What else does a guru do? He gives you poetry to deal with, which happens to be spiritually oriented rather than the give and take of daily communications. But yes, he loved to have people sit at his feet, and often he himself was prone while they were doing so. As you know, he used to do a lot of his teaching from a reclined position, both at the Center for Culture and Technology and on the couch in front of his fireplace, which was one of his favorite places in the world. And he loved you to sit there at his feet, and he would pronounce, and he was sometimes a little crusty when you challenged him, but if you did it with good humor and kept at it, then he'd take up the game, and he was an awfully good game player. Patrick Watson. There's a picture there of Marshall McLuhan and Buckminster Fuller seated at a couch having a little dialogue. Lastly, I think, maybe there's something on the next page. McLuhan is a difficult read, in a sense because he uses satire. He called his method Menippean satire. Oops, they spelled Menippean wrong here. This method is illustrated in some of his comments, some of his more extreme comments. For example, when he says that we become the servo mechanisms of our technologies, he's not celebrating that. What he's doing is pointing out that this is, in fact, how things work, that those of us who are addicted to constantly communicating must have the telephone growing out of our ears, or in my case, a pen growing out of my hand. And if we think about it, we begin to see that there is some sense to that. Also, what tends to happen with McLuhan is that it's forgotten that one of his chief insights was, it's not my private opinions that are important, what's important is to pay attention to what's going on. He repeated insistently that we should stop saying, is this a good or bad thing, and start saying, what's going on? Then we could come up with something relevant. Liz Jeffries. This idea of Menippean satire, do I have the book handy? Eric McLuhan did a lot of work on Menippean satire, also known as cynic satire. And it's a very expensive book, so I don't know if I'd recommend it. It's also kind of very specialized, but the thrust of Menippean satire is that its chief aim is to have an effect upon the reader, to jolt them, to wake them up, and it accomplishes this by many different mechanisms. There are lots of classic Menippean gambits. I think there was one last thing. Anyway, this is an interesting book. Camille Pali is in there. All kinds of fun stuff. Thanks for tuning in tonight. Rodrigo says YMCA. I don't know what you mean, Rodrigo. Maybe one of these times we'll do an Ask Me Anything. And you can ask me some questions. It doesn't really... I'm doing this from my phone and it's hard to read down there and it doesn't really serve for the YouTube folks who watch this after the fact, but maybe we can try that sometime on a different platform. Thanks for being here. Check out themcluhaninstitute.com for links to various things, and keep tuned for an announcement regarding the 12-week Understanding Media Intensive course I'm going to be delivering probably pretty soon. I'm really looking forward to that. Have a good night. Take care.